We have to create an alternate parallel universe that is the universe of justice and decency and truth in these days. In these moments of the life cycle of the Jewish year, we are reading from the Bible, the book of Exodus, the stories of a tyrant long ago who oppressed people, who chose to brutalize workers and racially discriminate and hurt the people who made it possible for the very society to exist. And we are told in this week's Parsha and in this section of the Bible, Shalach et ami, we said to that Pharaoh, to that tyrant, let my people go. Over and over again, the enslaved Israelite people, through their leadership, did not lose sight of who they were despite the despicable and tyrannical treatment of them, their children, and all the people. This Exodus theology of the book of Exodus, which Dr. King so deeply believed in and taught to all of us, is the Exodus theology of my people, too. It teaches us how not to despair when life is terrible, how not to give up when slavery lasts and brutalizes us to the core, how to know in our souls that God loves each one of us despite what despicable tyrants say, how to understand that the power of the universe is on our side despite what despicable tyrants will say, how to believe that we are on the side of right and goodness and justice despite what despicable tyrants will say, how to stand against racism, how to stand for immigrants and against Islamophobia, how to stand for peace and justice for Palestinians and for Jews, despite what despicable tyrants will say. Power, Dr. King taught us, does not come from within a White House or at the leadership of a government. It comes from within each of us. Do not despair, the book of Exodus tells us, whether the distance in the desert is long and the distance is arduous and there is not milk and honey to eat and drink. The power comes from within each one of us. The most famous speech a rabbi ever gave, which no one knows, is the speech that Rabbi Joachim Prince gave at the March on Washington in 1963. No one knows it because he gave that speech right before Dr. King spoke and right after Mahalia Jackson sang. But it was a great speech. Rabbi Prince said, and I quote from him, "When I was a rabbi leading the Jewish community in Berlin in the 1930s, under the Hitler regime, the most important thing I learned was that hatred and bigotry is actually not the most urgent problem. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence." Yeah. Never again means never again for anyone. Rabbi Prince went on to say that as a Jew who got to these United States because as an immigrant he was allowed in 1937, he was able to stand there in 1963 and say that as a Jew he learned from our God and from our history that we shall never be silent. And we stand with those who are suffering, and we stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder with Ravi Ragbir, who has been detained. We stand side by side with those immigrants who are facing deportation. We stand side by side from all those here in these United States who are standing for truth and justice because it is the right thing to do. And tomorrow there will be a solidarity gathering in the honor of Dr. King at 12 noon at Judson Memorial Church for Ravi and for all the immigrants right now in this country facing deportation and oppression. Because we know the fight is not over. And we know that Dr. King calls upon each of us to remember what Rabbi Prince understood. There will always be hatred. There will always be violence. The question is, will those around be silent, or will we speak out? Thank you.